on this corruption thing, I have concerns. I don't think it's part of the handshake. What you're trying to say is that there's nothing wrong with the system. What you have is a few rotten apples. People are in whatever camp they are, not necessarily out of principle. Uhuru I find as a dishonest politician from the word go.
The opening salvo in this drive to change the country's destiny, presumably is what we are all talking about today, which is corruption, right? Corruption being part of one of the things that they are discussed in that agenda as being an important thing that we must resolve. At least at the very, it's one of the first things that is being handled with the kind of unanimity that they decided upon in that agreement. But yet you've pronounced yourself on the same. This current fight you've described as being partisan, as being politics. And yet Raila doesn't seem to have pronounced himself quite in the same manner as you have. I'm not looking for unanimity between yourself and Raila, but I want to understand why, as a person who was so central to this, there is no reflection of your thinking in perhaps Raila's response to what's going on. Is it still benefit of the doubt?
Obviously, we quite frankly, we did not talk about that issue. Okay, let me put it this way. What is being done is not being done jointly. Okay, so we did not join government. So whatever Uhuru is doing and his government and his initiative is still there. He's doing his own things.
Raila has come out and said that we are going to fight corruption together.
Yes.
He hasn't said that we are not doing this right now. So the presumption is that they are together in this.
Yeah, it's a presumption, but once you go to this situation, then Raila is in a very different situation from the rest of us because he has to be diplomatic and he's the one who signed the document. We didn't. So he has to go into sort of engagement. He has to, but so we had not, because there was no point we agreed. We have discussed what, I mean, we are not advising government. So the only work of the handshake that was going on was the actual things to do with the structure, the setting up of these committees and all sorts of things. But government is government, so government is doing its own things.
No, but go back to.
But let me come to it now. If you see, don't forget, Uhuru is still a politician in government. He has his own political agenda. It hasn't gone away. So you also have people have to say that everything is being done is not a handshake. It also has other political. Government is going on. Uhuru has his four pillars. They are not part of the handshake. But he's still going. There are people who are invested in those four pillars. So there is still. So there is a tendency of people to look at everything from the lens of the handshake, which it isn't. I'm sure there is corruption which is going on even now. It's not part of the handshake. But the response is okay. The other thing is that we have not stopped being opposition. So although you may not find sort of Raila pronouncing himself, we have MPs in parliament, we have party people who are always pronouncing themselves. You have people like myself who obviously has my own position, which is not necessarily NASA's position. And my position was actually say, on this corruption thing, I have concerns. I don't think it's part of the handshake. What I see is first, I read in it first an attempt, a part of what I would call sanitizing, and I've called it sanitizing Uhuru. Yeah. And I also see it as a threat
to the handshake. Does Raila see it the same way?
I don't know. We haven't had that conversation. In this sense, you see, the handshake is about political reform. That because the thing that we have, I said fundamentally, is about elections.
Yeah.
It's about political reforms. That is the core issue. Our fundamental problem happens at the point of transfer of power. Free and fair elections or not. We can do all these other things. We are a perfect democracy for 4.5 years. But when it comes to the 5th year,
We collapse.
we collapse because of whatever reasons. Now, what we see is an effort to put corruption. Now, when we start going corruption the way they're going about it, by going for particular individuals, and we know these particular sort of piping up these particular individuals, what you're trying to say is that there's nothing wrong with the system. What you have is a few rotten apples. And you are scintillating the public. So I see this as consistent with the sort of political position of people like Uhuru Kenyatta and the interests which he represents, which is status quo interests, which is to shift focus from the political reforms and mesmerize Kenyans with things which they know that Kenyans will get excited about.
Yeah.
And Uhuru has said, before, because you need to see, before he started doing this corruption thing, he first of all stated, said maybe in passing, or seemingly in passing, that he is not going to campaign for referendum and political. So he was trying to distance himself from the political reform and pushing another agenda. So, and that's the way I see it as a threat to the handshake.
So is Uhuru an honest broker in this?
I never thought Uhuru was honest. No. I've never. Actually, Uhuru I find as a dishonest politician from the word go. So he did not. I had never at any point assumed that he went into this out of conviction. My view is that he went out this out of necessity. He was in a corner. It is also conceivable, my own hypothesis, that this is might not even be in his initiative. This might be the initiative of other actors in the state who are trying to, the security apparatus in particular, whose job it is to try and maintain stability. So it is, and even their way that the corruption thing is being prosecuted is a very securocrat type of approach, as opposed to an institutional and political approach.
This is part of the frustration that I feel with Kenyans, whether online or wherever I travel to, in looking at this handshake and looking at the fight against corruption. You said very clearly that this particular fight against corruption is not part of the handshake. But we've gone through one of the most traumatic periods that we've had in terms of our politics. Doesn't the opposition, at the very least, owe Kenyans the explanation that, look, hey, this is not how we would do it. Handshake or not, we don't have to disintegrate, fall to pieces because we disagree with you within the context of the handshake, but we disagree with how you are doing this because it's going to lead us down the same path.
If you look at our politics today, and you look at our political formations, I think it's fair to say that those political formations do not present principle. There are few people, there's a bunch of people within them, within NASA, for instance, who are part of our progressive politics. But there's a whole lot of them who are ex-Kanu people who only problem grievances that they are not on the other side. So our politics doesn't have that clear demarcation of it's the same sort of. And if you look at all the way from 1990s, you had people who joined as opposition. There's a sort of ramp of people who are there as a progressive, sort of pursuing progressive politics. Intellectuals joined with sort of civil society, sort of nascent civil society, and Kanu politicians who are excluded. And then if you look at the person who ended up being the the first opposition president. He was the last person to leave Kanu, Mwai Kibaki. Yeah. So even as you do these politics, you don't have.
We don't have honest brokers.
Not even honest brokers. People are in whatever camp they are, not necessarily out of principle. It is because that's where their ethnic group is, for whatever reason. It's because they have fallen out with people on the other side. It's basically which is the most convenient platform for them to try and get back into power. So that is a fact.
Yeah.
That's what we have. That's what we work with.
Then that's a perfect place to talk about the People's Assembly. The People's Assembly, as a representative of, at least how I seem to remember you describing it, is a place, a political space that offers an alternative to the status quo politics. Where is the thinking around the People's Assembly today, given that if on both sides we have people who represent self-interest, and we, keeping in mind that we are giving them as scions of Raila and Uhuru the benefit of the doubt, where's the alternative for a person who actually wants politics based on principle?
I think I've been amazed by how people labored, or what the lenses they wore to see the People's Assembly and see it as a sort of alternative, which it wasn't. The People's Assembly was predicated purely on Article 1 of the Constitution, which says that people can elect government. People in the government the sovereignty belongs to the people, and people can exercise that sovereignty
through government
indirectly through democratically elected representatives, or they can exercise it directly. There are all sorts of interpretations. And if government is subverted, or people subverted sort of the Constitution, people have a right to fight that government or to resist that government. I don't remember the language precisely. So the People's Assembly was predicated on, look, the presidential election has been subverted. We do not have a democratically elected president. That was our position. So we are going to exercise our sovereignty directly. Yeah, because we voted. Our vote was subverted. It didn't count. We did not. So we have not bestowed that sovereignty to whoever the person occupying that office. They have a usurped office. So we are going to sit down, form our own assembly, and decide how to restore our sovereignty in government. So it was very specific to electoral justice.
But you can imagine how people reimagined the People's Assembly, and you must get that frustration.
The people who reimagined, they didn't participate in it.
But it was supposed to represent them.
No. This was NASA. This was purely NASA people. Okay? We held, and we were in a process. We articulated the process. We were holding regional assemblies. We held 4. We had 2 at the coast. We had 1 in Kakamega. We had 1 in Homo Bay. We had about 3 others planned. We were then going to hold a national convention. And in that national convention, we were going to pass resolutions. And we were going to push those through a constitutional process, because we are using the Constitution. Okay, so the People's Assembly was the way for us pursuing our stolen election. That's all it was about. It is what provoked, we believe, the other side to then come out and say, we are going to adopt this agenda. So what they've done is actually adopted our agenda. Yeah, and said, okay, because you look at it, we were doing it one side.
Yeah.
But at some point down the road, when we push this agenda, we are going to have to confront the other side. So when the other side came and said, we'll support it, we said, fine, if you adopt the agenda, that's fine by us. So let's have a program of... So Raila Odinga, from where he sits, I think he believes that that is still the roadmap.
So the natural progression of the People's Assembly found space in the handshake.
Yes.
But the question of an alternative still remains. You might be working together to resolve these things, but who says that, you know, you represent everybody? Where is the alternative voice? Where should that come from,
now,
in your view?
We said, you know, we told Kenyans, you know, as we are in we are a political formation. We were going into an election. If we had lost that election fairly,
You would have been the alternative.
we would just have been in opposition. Whether we would have done a good job or not is a different question. I don't think we would have been an alternative because, as I said, I don't think that if you look at the opposition, if you remove sort of the Raila Odinga column, to which I belong, that is the only column which actually, even in the opposition, represents the progressive politics from the early 90s. Everybody else with us is ex-Kanu. They're not, I don't, and we already had those issues, as I said, even before. So, the question of, is there an alternative a political alternative in Kenya, other than this status quo of ethnic elites getting to stalemates, political stalemates, and cutting deals because we have refused to accept elections as a method of transferring power. So is there an alternative to that? I don't see it.